Just 32 miles of coastline divide Cape Cornwall from Wheal Kitty, east of St. Agnes. Yet, this small corner of Britain contains the ruins of some of the nation's most celebrated tin and copper mines. Decaying engine houses are monuments to men who laboured underground, often in horrendous conditions, many dying at an early age. Above ground, their world was hardly any better. Homes were primitive, pay was scant, and had to feed large families, reared to compensate for high child mortality. But by overcoming their harsh circumstances, Cornish miners earned fame throughout the world, and when the local Klondike hit rock bottom, they were able to export their skills abroad. Shafts grew ever deeper as men pursued metal, and inevitably the mines began to flood, inspiring the creation of the Cornish beam engine to pump the workings dry. The engines became so efficient that Cornish engineers were internationally revered, and their steam-driven engines could be found as far away as Australia and Peru. The prosperity of the mines was increasingly linked to technical discoveries in the 19th century. As the Industrial Revolution flourished, demand for tin for solder, bronze, tin plate and pewter increased dramatically. Copper was also needed in larger quantities to sheathe ships' hulls against worm attacks and for bronze and brass production. Many of the wheels of Victorian industry turned on bearings cast from the metals of Cornwall. Wheal Kitty is set high on the cliffs. Typically, for mines of this area, it produced copper as well as tin, but in far smaller quantities. The power of the Cornish beam engine was indicated by the diameter of its cylinder, with some reaching an amazing 100 inches. Wheal Kitty's was 65 inches. A powerful machine, but easily overshadowed by the engines of many larger mines. Wheal Kitty worked successfully from 1834 until the 1930s, and for most of those years, nearby St. Agnes was an important mining town. Now, it surrendered to an equally lucrative but less traditional industry: tourism. No parking, no turning, no chapel on Sunday. At the end of a winding seaward road, visitors confront the universal trappings of tourism and the continuing struggle between man and motor car. Beach balls, fluorescent buckets and spades, and holiday chalets are far away from the frugal lifestyle of the miners who were once the bedrock of a close and isolated community. But the mines have neither gone, nor can they be forgotten. The old dump looms above on a cliff, and today's visitors are left with tantalizing glimpses of a lifestyle vastly different from their own. Every street offers a vision from the past, with stacks and engine houses dwarfing cottages and modern bungalows. You can even find an engine house in your backyard, and the Miners and Mechanics Institute survives as a social club. Only the old harbour with boats which brought coal and sailed away laden with ore has disappeared completely from the St. Agnes of today. Westward from St. Agnes was Wheal Friendly, which used a 60-inch beam engine to keep itself dry. Its adventurers, as the shareholders of the time were called, were disappointed when the mine only produced 450 tons of tin and the same amount of copper. Wheal Friendly closed in 1915, but today a textbook engine house remains. Strong stone walls and an ivy-covered stack on a commanding cliff-top site combined to make one of the most striking relics on the Cornish coast.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Christian travelers.
Queen Victoria brought fame to Polberro Mine. After her official visit in 1846, it was grandly renamed Royal Polberro Consols. Tin dominated here, and Polberro pumped with a 60-inch engine. For a while, it provided Cornwall's richest haul of tin and work for 450 men. The engine house was re-roofed after closure and used as a miner's shelter and storehouse. The roof keeps wind and frost at bay, allowing Polberro to offer a clearer impression of its appearance during working life. But houses like these are not the only remnants of this once vast industry, for many less obvious examples can be found. Coal, timber, iron and steel merchants and bankers all prospered. Foundries, engineering firms and builders found new customers in mining. Many fine houses and public properties that can still be seen today were built on mining profits.
Come and I will tell you the story of my country, that all the wide, wide world, all the world shall know of Cornwall, my own dear land, my kernel, my own dear country.
One of the most dramatically located mines in Cornwall is Wheal Coates, near Chapel Porth, with its tow and roth engine house. Higher up the cliff was a winder, known locally as a whim, which drew men and ore to the surface, and a stamps engine where the ore was then crushed. But there turned out to be precious little to crush, and a pitiful output was a poor reward for shifts spent among the windswept and barren slopes of one of the most exposed workplaces in England.
All the wide, wide world, all the world shall know of Cornwall, my own dear land, my kernel, my own dear country.
Close by at Porthtowan is the strange little mine known as Wheal Lushington. Its engine house was built for a rotary steam engine, which would have transferred power via moving flat rods to the mine in the cliff behind. When Lushington's meagre prospects were realized, the plan was aborted and the engine never installed. And only the little engine house survives, unconsummated to this day. Once it was a dwelling, then a cafe. Now it's a good example of the rigors of Cornish mining. Great hopes which come to naught. The valley running inland from Porthtowan is a classic copper mining landscape. The remains of Wheal Ellen, with its castellated stack, are set among hills streaked with reds, yellows and browns that clearly betray the extraction of copper. Mountainous dumps of spoil surround United Hills, part of a group of mines later known as Wheal, which had their heyday in the 1850s with a 70-inch pumping engine in continuous use. When an attempt was made to restart the mine in 1906, Wheal was the first in the county to install the newly invented electric water pump, and the arrival of electrical power put the writing on the engine house wall for the Cornish beam engine. Even now, all is not silent. Wheal is used for survey training by the Royal School of Mines. Little evidence of mining remains from here until west of St.Ives. The coast between is less mineralized. Beyond St.Ives, the mineral-bearing ground improves, and coastal and smaller inland mines abound. Some of these are neighbours to well-known prehistoric monuments, quoits, stone circles and ancient villages. Both mines and monuments are antiquities now, with engine house and quoit erected thousands of years apart, but made from the same Cornish granite. And this shared origin suggests a similarity of spirit, as if both had rested quietly here forever. early as the 1790s, ore was being won from the largest mine on the Penwith Peninsula. But the name of Levant became notorious throughout the nation in October 1919, when its man-engine disaster killed 31 men and seriously injured 11 more. The man engine was a hazardous way to convey miners up and down the shaft, a system of steam-driven rods supporting platforms which the men stepped onto and then off in succession as they rose and fell. 150 men were riding up to the surface when a rod broke away and smashed through safety catches which were supposed to prevent precisely the tragedy that occurred. The disaster hastened Levant's closure, but earlier steady copper production had been achieved by 1820, and 30 years on, tin was being produced in large quantities until it finally overtook copper in importance. Levant was the last of Cornwall's great copper mines, producing metal up to 1910. Many tunnels were excavated out beneath the Atlantic. On stormy days, the miners could hear boulders rolling above them on the seabed. Copious amounts of arsenic were also produced, and amongst the ruins are fine examples of arsenic furnaces called calciners. In conditions unthinkable today, workers wore only crude face masks made of wet cloth to protect them from the poisonous clouds of dust. Levant finally closed in 1930, leaving a vast area of colourful and bizarre relics, and sadly it's now been joined in stillness by its neighbour, Wheal, which until 1986 was one of the few working mines left in the duchy. Botallack, a mile to the west towards Cape Cornwall, was the most famous of them all. The precarious position of its crown's engine houses testifies to the skill and ingenuity of Cornish miners. These old buildings draw as much admiration now as they did when they were built. First, the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall, and then in 1846, Victoria and Albert themselves came to visit a mine more written of and photographed than any other, surrounded as it is today by a profusion of strange shapes and curiosities which show how industry once ruled this clifftop site. Before 1872, the world's two main sources of tin were Malaya and Cornwall. Wars and civil unrest made continuous production in Malaya impossible, and this allowed Cornwall to gain the advantage. The two areas were able to supply the world's demand. But in 1872, huge deposits of alluvial tin were found in Australia. Peace also returned to Malaya, and output increased. The glut that ensued caused tin prices to drop by 50% in only 3 years. It was a disaster for Cornwall, and many smaller mines closed. Even large mines were hard hit, and slowly the mining boom started to grind to a halt. The remnants of several large mines border St. Just, once one of the area's principal mining villages, and the hand-drilling stones on the green are a peculiar relic of hard rock mining. They were used by groups of miners competing to see who could drill fastest, and the most trusting miner of all was the one who turned the hand drill while his mates smacked away with their heavy hammers. Drilling contests were an energetic holiday from an exhausting job, but there were other, lazier and more refreshing recreations to be found around the village, enjoyed despite all the sermons of the Wesleyan Church. For many a miner's wage was drunk away on pay night.
The riven axe of Elven, not far away, was ground, from where the drills of Holman make bright the name of Cornwall, my own dear land, my Colonel, my own dear country. Deep underground the miner still bites into the load, while near 4,000 years
Crumbling Wheal Owles, a mile from St. Just, shelters the ghosts from another catastrophe. As early as 1841, it had employed 200 people, and a few years later it had sunk to 1,200 feet, and 8 steam engines were pumping out water, raising and crushing ore. 20 men drowned when old flooded workings were breached and a wall of water rushed in. An old miner who lived in Botallack was told the story by his father, who witnessed the accident.
Well, he said he went down, and he said on the wagon they loaded up with timber, planks and that, and they pushed it in where they was going to work. All of a sudden, they heard a roar, and he said it took off to run, the back shaft. And he said, on the way back, he said, harder they was running towards the shaft, was a sound coming towards an harder, you know, as they was going back shaft. Well, he said, by the time he got back shaft, that there sound was the wagon that they pushed in the morning. The men went up the ladder road, but he said a boy fell down the skip hole. The fellow said, I went there, and on the stoop down, I put my hand down there and caught the boy by the ear of the head and pulled him up. I went to the ladder road and put the boy in front of me. And the boy walked up in front of me. When we got up to the audit level, that would be sea level, some of the bosses there, and they said to him, he said, is there any more, Jim? He said, no. He said, I don't think he says any more. He said, I think we're the last ones.
In 40 years, the St. Just amalgamated mine only managed to yield 3,000 tons of tin ore, despite its extensive workings and surface buildings on the cliffs above Priest's Cove. Cape Cornwall's promontory fronts the Atlantic breakers, and the stack of the mine that bears its name has been left as a monument to the area's miners. The count house, where wages were paid, and the old winding engine's boiler house have become private dwellings. Even before the turn of the 19th century, much cheaper metals from abroad had killed the golden goose, and most mines were silent or in steep decline. Some were reopened in the 1920s with great expectations that more modern methods would bring success, but it was not to be. Many ex-miners returned to Cornwall's other traditional industries, fishing and farming. Come the 1930s, and mining was all but dead. Cape Cornwall is the end of the line. Beyond is the Atlantic and America. In the 1860s, over 300 mines had work. By the end of the century, less than 10 struggled on. Many miners emigrated to the United States to exploit the copper and other metals found there and in South America. The colonies welcomed Cornish miners, for their reputation as the best had preceded them. Forlorn ruins on the cliffs are all that now remain, except for Cornish names on far-flung maps where the miners of Cornwall carried on their hard-won traditions.